Okay, so I know I always give disclaimers at the start of my videos about swearing, but I felt the need to say this one out loud, just in case people just had this video on in the background and aren't actually watching it, and don't actually read the disclaimer. The original Yu-Gi-Oh manga is pretty dark, and since the entire point of this video is explaining what happens in it, that means there will be themes that people will find uncomfortable. Because of that, I feel the need to give a trigger warning. There will be depictions and therefore descriptions of some pretty dark themes, the ones that would cause the biggest problems being sexual assault and suicide. For those who have had traumatic pasts and don't think they can watch this, I completely understand. When I was a kid, there were three main things my life consisted of: wrestling, Pokemon, and shonen manga and anime. Included amongst them was Yu-Gi-Oh!, a manga and anime that resulted in a real-world card game being made. A card game that I played when I was a kid, and cannot play now because the rules became way too fucking confusing. Seriously? Pendulum summoning? What the fuck is that? XYZ? It's pronounced Ixies! Fuck you, I was there when Kaiba had the original XYZ monsters. Anyways, I would always borrow the manga from the library, so I never owned a physical copy. But recently I decided to go back and read through some of the different manga I used to read in my childhood. I looked online to see if I could find it, and I found something that sounds like an ad. Okay, yeah, this bit sounds like I'm sponsored. I assure you, I am not. I just genuinely think this is amazing. That Viz, the English publishers of shonen manga, have a subscription service that is genuinely one of the best things I've ever found. It's $1.99 US a month, so that's not even $3 Australian, and you get access to pretty much all shonen manga. Talking Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto, Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Punch Man, Dr. Stone, My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, like, so much shit for fuck all. I promise you, I am not sponsored. Anyways, the video. I grew up watching the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and reading the manga, so there are things that surprise people who have only ever watched the anime. Obviously, they don't surprise me because I grew up with them. I know them. So for this video, I decided to compare the differences between the manga and the anime. For those who know, the anime and the manga are two completely different versions of the same story. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain. The original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga debuted in the magazine Weekly Shonen Jump on September 30th, 1996, written by Kazuki Takahashi. The phrase Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally translates to King of Games, and that's exactly what the main character becomes. Also, honestly, when I was a kid, I just thought it was a portmanteau of Yugi and Pharaoh. It ran until March 8th, 2004, and there were two different anime adapted from it. The first one, simply called Yu-Gi-Oh! And produced by Toei Animation, was not an exact one-to-one adaptation of the manga, but it did a fairly good job of it. However, this version was deemed too violent for Western viewers and so was never officially dubbed into English. You see, back then, the series had more of a horror vibe to it. The card game was practically non-existent, only appearing in two major story arcs. This series is unofficially referred to by fans as Season 0, a term that literally everybody has used for ages, unless you ask this one guy who claims that Little Karibo, the creator of the popular parody series Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged Series, was the one who made the term popular and is basically a cancer on the world. The original run lasted the first 59 chapters of the manga, 27 episodes and 7 manga volumes in total. After that, in much the same way that the Dragon Ball manga continued with that name, but the period after the time skip was referred to as Dragon Ball Z outside Japan, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga continued with the original name in Japan but underwent a name change in the West. This section of the story focused much more heavily on the card game, originally called Magic and Wizards but later renamed to Duel Monsters. In the West,
This was called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist, and with that came a new anime, this time produced by Studio Gallop. This series ran in Japan from April 18th, 2000 until September 29th, 2004. Shortly after it began airing in Japan, the English rights were picked up by 4Kids, and Western audiences were introduced to the English dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! On September 29th, 2001. Now, 4Kids were pretty well known for censoring things. Guns were replaced by people pointing, cards had any religious or sexual imagery altered, and any depictions of violence were completely removed. Death was replaced with the Shadow Realm, Saw Blades were replaced with Dark Energy discs, that sort of thing. For this reason, I won't solely be comparing the manga to the 4Kids dub, and where necessary, I'll be referring to the original Japanese version. So the way I'm going to do this is, basically I'm just going to recap the plot of the anime and point out where it's different in the manga. Or in the case of this video, I'm basically just going to take the first episode and then point out the, several chapters that aren't included. Also, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to refer to characters by their English names. I will tell you what their Japanese names are though, so let's get that out of the way quickly. We'll start with the ones that are the same. Obviously, the main character, Yugimoto, is the same, although the spelling of his name varies between everything. Other than that, both Kaiba brothers, those being Seto and Mokuba, retain their original names. They even get to keep the spelling. Though he won't be showing up in this video, he will be later on, so Ryo Bakura also keeps his original name. Given how few characters we're focusing on here, all that's left are Yugi's friends and Grandpa. His grandpa's name change isn't too important, going from Sugoroku to Solomon, since I'll probably just refer to him as Yugi's grandpa. Other than that though, Anzumazaki becomes Taya Gardner, Hiroto Honda becomes Tristan Taylor, and Katsuya Janochi becomes Joey Wheeler. Now, my original plan was to cover all of Duelist Kingdom in this video, but it's already going to be too long because I decided to do a long-winded intro. Also, because the first episode actually doesn't come from the Duelist era, but from the original. There are several chapters involving Seto Kaiba that just get merged into one single episode. The very early parts follow the first of these chapters, while the rest somewhat follow the later chapters, the Death Tea arc. Since that's a lot to be dealing with, I decided to just tell some backstories and then tell the Kaiba part of the story. Now, to be clear, all the backstories I'm covering are done in flashbacks in the anime, which is why I won't be including the chapters that introduce Yami Bakura, and just Bakura in general. And one final thing, before we get on with it, I know I said I wasn't going to be comparing directly to the 4Kids dub, but I will occasionally bring some stuff up. The first of which being that in the 4Kids dub, and only in the 4Kids dub, it's made pretty unclear where they actually are. Where the series is taking place. Is it Japan? Is it America? They don't really seem to have an answer. And everything else, including the official English translation of the manga, it is entirely clear. Yugi and his friends live in Japan. This will come up more in the next video, but I figured I should mention it here. Anyways, that's enough rambly shit. Let's begin. We start with one of the flashbacks, which was actually the entire first chapter of the manga and covers the story of how Yugi and Joey became friends. Episode 3 of the anime features a quick recap of this chapter. They pretty accurately go over how Joey and Tristan used to bully Yugi, including Joey stealing a piece of Yugi's Millennium Puzzle before he completed it, then throwing it into the school pool. After that, Ushio the Hall Monitor appoints himself Yugi's bodyguard for a huge fee, but Yugi stands up for his bullies. Joey decides to redeem himself by retrieving Yugi's puzzle piece, and that's about all that it says. Well, okay, the Japanese version includes Joey mentioning that he has a treasure that can be seen, but remains unseen, which is a riddle originally about the puzzle that Joey used for his friendship with Yugi. But in the anime, Ushio just seems to get away with beating the shit out of our main cast? That's not how it happened in the manga. Although, to be fair, that was something that even Season 0 didn't have the balls to cover properly. You see, the reason Yugi becomes the king of games is because he initially challenges his enemies to different shadow games, where the loser has to suffer a penalty. In most cases these penalties are hallucinations, but sometimes he just straight up kills people. Ushio got off lucky. Now in Season 0 they had Yugi and Ushio tied to the side of a building playing a game where there were cards laid out. Whatever card they picked up, they walked that many spaces up the building they were on the side of. However, they were attached by a rope, so every time one person went up, it would lower the other person. That seems bad, right?
Well, in the manga, Yugi challenges Ushio to a game with the very knife Ushio had previously threatened him with. With double the money Ushio had asked for, Yugi's game is essentially that you have to lay the money on your hand and stab through it. You get to keep whatever money you can stab, but you always have to stab more than one bill. The idea obviously being that if you can't control your greed, you'll end up stabbing your own hand. Ushio fails to control his greed, but rather than stab his own hand, he turns the knife on Yugi, who just casually jumps 10 feet in the air, then sentences Ushio to his penalty, believing he's rolling in money. He's found the next day to have actually been rolling in leaves and rubbish. So remember this lesson, kids. If you bully someone, they may stand up for you when a bigger bully comes along, and then they'll gain the powers of darkness and use them to mentally torture that bigger bully. Is that really the message we're teaching these kids?
Teia's backstory is completely different. In both versions, Joey and Yugi find out that Teia has an after-school job at Burger World, although in the manga it's made clear that after-school jobs are against school rules. You'll come to find that this school is incredibly strict. Anyway, we also find out that Teia is working at Burger World so that she can study dance in New York when she graduates. However, from this point on it changes. See, in the anime, Yugi gives her a note saying that they've found a place she can practice without being found.
At least that's what it says in the dub. In the Japanese version, it makes a bit more sense when the note says to meet in the gym's storage room, otherwise the person who wrote the note, which turns out not to be Yugi, would reveal Teia's secret. For the record, I do like that this change means that 4Kids had to change the picture on the back, so instead of Teia working at Burger World, it's literally just a picture of dance shoes.
However, once she gets there, she's confronted by a man who either wants to rob her or do some really perverted things with her, depending on the language. She's then saved by Yami Yugi, leading to her feelings for this specific side of our protagonist. In the manga, it all happens immediately. Yugi and Joey find Teia at Burger World, she tells them her plan, but in all of this, a dangerous criminal has escaped from prison. He enters the establishment and takes Teia hostage.
Also in Season 0 they made the manager the criminal, which I've worked in fast food for a long time. I can agree.
He blindfolds her and demands vodka and cigarettes, which leads to Yugi challenging him to a game. This is one of those games where the penalty is death, as Yugi outsmarts the criminal into pouring vodka all over himself. The end of his cigarette falls and he's engulfed in flames. Believe it or not, I think the biggest change here is the fact that Teia actually sees Yugi in the anime. In the manga, Teia was still blindfolded until she was taken to safety. Hell, even Joey didn't get to see who had challenged the criminal. As a result, Teia is only interested in this mysterious man without a face. Later on, when Shadi enters her mind, he even sees a picture of a man with no face, implying that she still thinks about him, wondering who saved her that day. The way it's laid out in the anime, it almost makes it seem as though Tristan also became friends with Yugi in that first chapter. But that's not the case. Tristan still hates Yugi until much later on, but is still friends with Joey. That all changes when Tristan develops a crush on a girl in their class named Miho Nasaka, nicknamed Ribbon. She hung around with the group in Season 0, but here she's just a character of the week. Joey asks Yugi for help, thinking that there must be something at the game shop that can help Tristan express his feelings towards her. But Tristan is against the idea, certain that even just learning about his secret, Yugi will be mocking him because he thinks Yugi holds a grudge for all the times he was bullied. Yugi's grandpa shows them a puzzle that you write a love message on, then separate the pieces. Tristan gets the puzzle but has no idea what to write, so he makes Yugi write it out. My beloved Ribbon, you look perfect in your yellow ribbon. I love you more than anything in the universe. From Hiroto Honda.
Whew. Well, it's working on me.
The next day they put the puzzle in Miho's desk. Unfortunately, it just so happens that dating is banned at this school. Christ, can these kids do anything? They also have the unfortunate timing of this being the same day that their teacher, Miss Chono, is in a particularly bad mood. Miss Chono is known as the Wicked Witch of Expel, having expelled 15 students in the last month alone. When the vice principal asks her how a date, I guess, went, it annoys her, and we see that she relies on makeup for her looks.
Unnatural, baby.
She decides a round of expulsions will put her in a good mood, so she inspects everyone's desk. Of course, she finds the puzzle and begins putting it together. Just as she's about to find out who it's from so she can expel them, her makeup begins to fall off like puzzle pieces. Yami turned the puzzle itself into a shadow game. The more she puts the puzzle together, the more her makeup, and the makeup of her soul comes off. Afterwards, Tristan does wind up asking Miho out, but she rejects him. But this changes everything for them.
I spent enough time not talking about the main thing the title mentions, so here it goes. Episode 1 of the anime.
We start off the episode and already we're in a different location. The episode begins at the school where Yugi is teaching Joey how to play Duel Monsters, then they go to the game shop after they hear about Yugi's grandpa having a rare card, something that Kaiba overhears, prompting him to go to the game shop as well. This chapter of the manga actually starts in the game shop with Grandpa introducing them to the game, stating that it's a hit in America and is starting to gain a following in Japan. Also in the anime, Yugi and his friends are the ones to ask Grandpa to show them his rare card, while in the manga, no one ever actually asks. Grandpa just mentions he has one amazing card, then shows it to them. Guess he just likes showing off. He also explains that the reason only 4 versions of the card exist is because it was too overpowered. Which makes sense. Even though you couldn't directly attack in those days, it was still a 3000 attack point monster in a game where you got 2000 life points. In the manga, Kaiba decides to enter because, it's a game shop. There might be a chance to get some good cards. In both versions there's a confrontation between Joey and Kaiba, with Kaiba basically calling Joey a worthless duelist, and noting that he's the #1 duelist in the region or country, depending on how he happens to say it in the version. Now, even though he had suspicions in the anime, he never knew for a fact that the rare card in question was the Blue Eyes White Dragon, hence going to check it out for himself. So in both versions, he is beyond shocked to find the card in what he considers to be a dump. Though, it's important to note that Kaiba actually notes at this point in the manga that he's never so much as seen a Blue Eyes before. Kaiba then proceeds to slam a briefcase onto the counter, offering to trade every single card in the case, just for that one Blue Eyes. But Grandpa refuses, explaining that the card has sentimental value to him because it was given to him by a close friend. Also in the manga, as he's saying this, we can see in the background a picture of Grandpa with Arthur Hawkins, or Arthur Hopkins as he's known in the Japanese version of the anime. He doesn't even appear in the manga. That's also where the anime and the manga split off. From this point until closer to the actual episode 1 duel between Yugi and Kaiba, we're all manga. The following day at school, Yugi and Joey are playing Duel Monsters with an audience when Kaiba approaches them. Kaiba figures out that Yugi has the Blue Eyes White Dragon with him and asks to see it again, under the guise that he just wants to look at it, but in reality he swaps it for a carefully crafted fake, thinking Yugi wouldn't notice. But he does. After school, Yugi confronts Kaiba about the theft, but Kaiba denies it, hitting Yugi with his briefcase and walking away. Yugi challenges Kaiba to a duel which he claims will be different to what they're used to, something Kaiba won't see until they start, but this isn't the duel that got adapted. Once Kaiba summons his first monster, he notices that the card has come to life. Yugi then explains that the loser will know death, which probably should scare Kaiba, but instead he finds the whole thing exciting. Though Yugi wins the first exchange, Kaiba manages to gain the advantage. That is, until Yugi manages to draw the summoned skull. Also, you may have noticed from these screenshots, but since the actual card game wasn't a thing at the time, the rules were kind of just whatever Takahashi decided they were. Once the duel is close again, Kaiba finally draws the card he's been waiting for, the Blue Eyes White Dragon. However, when Kaiba declares an attack, the Blue Eyes refuses to listen. The heart of the cards is a real thing apparently, and the Blue Eyes won't attack because it's loyal to Yugi's grandpa. The dragon destroys itself, and on the next turn, Yugi uses Monster Reborn to bring the Blue Eyes back on his side of the field. It attacks, and Kaiba loses and suffers the penalty to no death. Kaiba is trapped on the inside of a card and attacked by monsters in a hallucination. The next thing of significance to happen in this episode happens a long way down the line. For context, the chapters with Kaiba were chapters 9 and 10. This next chapter is chapter 24. A new game has become popular amongst elementary school kids. Duel Monsters. Wait. Oh, thank fuck I'm not covering that! It's a sort of chess-style game, but with monsters. I'm not explaining it, it doesn't really matter. The only reason this is of any significance is because in this chapter, we meet Mokuba Kaiba, Seto's younger brother. Anyway, you should realize how this goes. Mokuba challenges Yugi to a game of Catmon, Mokuba cheats so that Yugi gets weak monsters, Yugi overcomes the odds anyway. The important part here is this. As Mokuba takes his penalty of hallucinating being trapped inside a Catmon capsule, he tells Yugi that Seto's revenge, a secret project called Death Tea, is coming. From a giant gap to a very short one, the next chapter has Joey mentioning that some guy with Kai for his initials holds the high score on just about every game in the arcade. Of course, Kai gets revealed to be Seto Kaiba. The only other thing that matters is that the next chapter picks up where this one ends. Yugi, who was beaten up in the last chapter because again, Yugi is a punching bag in the manga, and Joey are walking down the street when a car pulls over and the driver informs them that Seto Kaiba has invited them to his house. Yugi notes that Kaiba hasn't been to school lately, and it's here that we learn that he's the president of Kaiba Corp. Mokuba is also in the car and tells Yugi that the project Kaiba had been working on, the mysterious Death Tea, is finished. They arrive at Kaiba's house and are greeted by Kaiba's servant, Hobson. His name is Daimon in Japan, and he remains unnamed in the manga. You may notice that this is the man who kidnaps Grandpa in the anime, and while that is possible, it's not something we see happen in the manga. Hobson notes that Kaiba has gone to bed and that they shouldn't disturb him with how hard he's been working as of late. Mokuba decides that Yugi and Joey will be his guests then, and orders Hobson to prepare a special course. A bunch of plates are served up on a turntable and Mokuba challenges them to a game. You spin the table and eat whatever food lands in front of you. Joey jokingly asks if there's any poison in the food, but it turns out not to be a joke as he actually gets poisoned. Mokuba then reveals that not only does he have the antidote, but there is one more poison dish left. Yugi pretty quickly picks up on the fact that Mokuba is cheating, so he comes up with a plan. He ties the Millennium Puzzle to the turntable and it smashes the switch Mokuba is using to control the turntable. The final poison plate lands in front of Mokuba as he is forced to eat. The next chapter opens in Kaiba's nightmare as he remembers the duel with Yugi and, more specifically, the punishment. Apparently, this has been a recurring nightmare for him ever since it happened. Yugi and Joey were also forced to stay the night and finally get to see Kaiba in the morning. Kaiba spends his time acting nice as he takes our leading duo to the grand opening of Kaiba Land. As they enter to cheers from kids, Kaiba is confronted by his father's former right-hand man who accuses Kaiba of driving his own father to suicide. After Kaiba has him ejected, he shows Yujo the sights and tells Yugi that he set up a special show just for him. Once they get there, they find a glass box and sitting inside is Yugi's grandpa. Now, here's a difference. We actually get to see the duel between Kaiba and Grandpa in this version. When Kaiba plays his first card, the Hitatsumi Giant, it comes to life. That's right, the holograms Kaiba is seen as a visionary for were inspired by the first duel. By the way, get used to these glass boxes because these are what they have in the manga as opposed to the bigger arena type things that we see throughout the first season. It's also here that we learn not only that Kaiba has gotten his hands on the last 3 Blue Eyes, but we also learn how he got them. One man, he forced into bankruptcy. The second man, he had roughed up by the Mafia. And the third, he drove to commit suicide. We then briefly return to the world of the anime with Kaiba ripping Grandpa's blue eyes in half, although his reasoning has changed seeing as how it doesn't make sense for him to say the card betrayed him last time when in the anime, there is no last time. Instead, his reasoning is that this way the card could never be used against him. Kaiba then forces Yugi's grandpa to experience the same hell as him, forcing him to know death through virtual reality. Yugi begs Kaiba to let his grandpa out, and Kaiba agrees on one condition. Yugi must face Death T, the amusement park of death. An entire theme park that Kaiba built specifically to exact revenge on Yugi. Again returning briefly to the world of the anime, Yugi tends to his grandpa who gives Yugi his deck to defeat Kaiba. Wait a minute, why are the cards all pixely like that? They're way too big to not be able to see what it is. Damn it, did 4Kids get to them already? Anyways, Kaiba tells Yugi that their battle will be on the top floor of Death T, and Joey volunteers to help Yugi out. It then turns out that Tristan had also been at Kaiba Land and also volunteers to help Yugi. They're also joined by Joji, Tristan's nephew who made Tristan take him to Kaiba Land. The group enters Death T, and at the first game they find Taya. Apparently Taya got fired from Burger Bob for punching out a customer who got handsy, so she got a job at Kaiba Land. The first game is essentially laser tag, and Taya acts as the host, rules explainer person. Joji is left with Taya, who pretty quickly finds out that he's about as perverted as the rest of them. Oh yeah, I never mentioned that, but all the guys are pretty perverted. Yugi and his grandpa included. That's not the important part, though. It turns out Kaiba has hired a group of trained gunmen to act as his team. On top of that, while Team Protagonist just has ordinary laser tag guns that don't do anything, all of Team Kaiba have been equipped with guns that shoot 1,000,000 volts when they make contact with a sensor on the base. Team Kaiba originally attempts to do normal guerrilla tactics, but Joey breaks convention, climbing on top of the blocks and hitting one of them with an attack from above. Hey, who said melee kills are against the rules? However, when Tristan gets a direct hit on one of the enemies, he doesn't seem to notice. But when Tristan's shoulder gets just a tiny bit hit, he notices the electric charge it sends. He tells the other two to fall back and informs them that something's wrong. When Joji doesn't like Tristan talking bad about Kaiba, he takes Taya's gun and fires, completely destroying one of the spare vests. Tristan sees his opportunity and takes Taya's gun, pulling a Die Hard-esque move with Joji on his back. He was also nice enough to turn the voltage down so that Team Kaiba would live. In between stages 1 and 2 is a ride run by Hobson. Easy enough, right? Well, this is the electric chair ride. A House of Horror style ride where anyone who makes a noise will be immediately executed. It should also be noted that Joey has been proven to not be the bravest person. Hobson is also taking part in the game, and we actually learn that he's an expert torturer. Neat! Joji is the only one who isn't chained down, and in an attempt to save Taya, he delivers his special attack, shitting in Hobson's lap. Hobson is electrocuted and Joey is shown to have survived because at some point he fainted. Stage 2 of Death Tea is the murderer's mansion, an escape room inside which is a notorious serial killer known as the Chopman. Also as they enter, Yugi feels his grandpa's heartbeat through his cards, and knows he's in pretty bad condition. After solving a challenge that stops them from getting their hands cut off, no, seriously, Joji is seemingly kidnapped by the Chopman. However, Joji is simply used as a pawn as he handcuffs Joey to the Chopman and the two are forced into battle to the death, which Joey eventually wins by lighting the Chopman on fire. For those keeping track, that's 2 people lit on fire this video and I didn't even mention American Hero. There's probably even more that I can't remember right now. Anyway, on stage 3, Kaiba decides to separate the group. They get locked inside a square room with no way out other than the way they came in. Above them is a seemingly endless empty space, but there is a hole in the wall about 10 meters up. They remain trapped in the room and Yugi says one too many times that it's all his fault that everyone is here. To which Joey snaps back that it was their own choice to join him because they're friends. Joey gives a heartfelt speech stating that he never liked himself and you know what? It's just better to read it. I cannot do it justice. With another brief shot back to the anime, this is the point where Taya marks their hands with a smiley face. But this touching moment is cut off when a giant cube drops from above. They eventually figure out the game. They have to climb the cubes to get out, while also avoiding being crushed. After a while, Taya is able to realize that the cubes fall in a rhythm. That works until the rhythm changes and Tristan just barely avoids getting crushed. Joey and Taya make it to the exit and Tristan helps Yugi and Joji get out. Unfortunately, Tristan is trapped. When he dodged the last cube, his jacket got caught. Helping Yugi was all he could do as the final block falls down, locking him in. And look at that, it's the final chapter of the volume. What a heavy way to end it. Man, I wonder what the next page could put. Ooh, a fun board game! Anyway, the next chapter begins immediately where that one ended, even giving us a quick recap. Joey is insisting that Tristan can't actually be dead. Once again, Yugi blames himself for what happened, but his anger at Kaiba comes out as he becomes a mess of fury on the floor. Speaking of anger, while all this goes on, Mokuba is upset with Seto because they placed bets on which stage Yugi would fail at, and Seto bent against his little brother. For what he would become, this is a totally different side of Kaiba. This is followed up by an infamous line from the English translation of the manga that I can neither confirm nor deny since I can't read Japanese. But apparently in this panel, the Japanese version just has Joey asking Yugi if he's okay. Viz decided to add the line, "Do you need your insulin or something?" At this point, Yugi finally opens up to his friends about the other side of him. Of course, Yugi doesn't know much about it at this point either. He blacks out whenever Yami takes over, and he's kept it a secret for 2 reasons. Firstly, he's afraid of his other self. And secondly, he was worried that if his friends found out, they wouldn't want to be friends with him anymore. Joey of course assures him that that's a stupid thought and that they'll always be friends. They enter Death T4 to find that this will be a game of Catbon against Mokuba. Joey initially offers to join Yugi, but Yugi decides that this one will have to be done alone, and claims that he won't be afraid of his other side anymore. For the first time, Taya and Joey see the other Yugi. The only real thing to note is that Joey and Taya are taken hostage. Sorry I'm skipping over stuff, it's just, this is already pretty long and I really don't want to talk about Duel Monsters. Yugi wins, Mokuba faces the punishment, once again to no death. To make matters worse, Seto is the one to force Mokuba to face the penalty.
Yugi saves Mokuba, telling him that he never would have won if he didn't have friends who reached out to him. Then we see a picture that is familiar to the anime viewers. A young Seto and Mokuba playing chess. Mokuba thinks about how much his brother has changed since the day that picture was taken, and hopes that when Yugi faces him it can bring his old self back. Also at this point, Joey calls Hanasaki at the hospital, who tells them that Grandpa is going in for surgery and there isn't much hope that he'll make it. Hanasaki is a character who I really wish had more presence in the manga and any presence in the anime, and I would love to talk about him, but in terms of the episode, we're barely halfway through. On to the duel. Other than the battle box that I already mentioned, another minor difference is that in the manga, this duel takes place in front of a massive audience. However, thankfully when it comes to the key points of the duel, there's a lot of similarities. Kaiba opens with a Hitatsumi Giant and Yugi responds with the Winged Dragon, Guardian of the Fortress. However, Kaiba's next turn is different. In the manga, he summons the Wicked Worm Beast with the intention of sacrificing his own monster to kill Yugi's, but the bullshit early rules kick in, and because the dragon has the power of flight, it gets a 35% chance to evade, which it does. However, Kaiba follows up with what he does in the anime, combining Sagi the Dark Clown with Dark Energy, or Negative Energy in the English dub, to triple its attack. Yugi then draws the right leg of the Forbidden One, but not realizing what it is, he plays other cards in defense mode to protect his life points. Sagi starts to go on a tear until Yugi draws Gaia the Fierce Knight to destroy the clown. However, just as Yugi's luck is looking up, Kaiba draws what he believes to be the key to his victory, his first Blue Eyes White Dragon. Again, Yugi has no choice but to remain on the defensive. This is made even harder though when Kaiba summons his second Blue Eye. Just when it seems all hope is lost, Yugi manages to draw the Swords of Revealing Light to freeze the dragons in place for 3 turns. It's also at this point that Yugi's grandpa apparently becomes a Force Ghost to drop hints that these arm and leg cards Yugi has drawn aren't actually junk and are actually the pieces of Exodia. On Kaiba's next turn, the rules once again act weird, and this one doesn't even have a defense. Swords of Revealing Light, even in the manga, clearly states that all of your opponent's monsters can't attack for 3 turns. That includes monsters summoned on any of those 3 turns, yet Kaiba is able to just summon his Judge Man and attack. Yugi then summons what would go on to become his signature monster, the Dark Magician. But once again it's decided fuck Swords of Revealing Light as Kaiba summons his third Blue Eyes to destroy the Dark Magician. Yugi's final bit of hope rests within drawing the final piece of Exodia, but as he reaches for the cards, they seem to slip away from him. He's afraid. But just then, 3 hands with a familiar marking across them reach out to help him. With the heart of the cards on his side, Yugi brings forth Exodia, winning the duel. And I must say this is definitely a point towards the English dub of the anime, because Rage Inferno Exodia Flame is a hell of a lot less iconic than
Exodia! Obliterate!
Kaiba loses, but rather than face death again, Yugi gives him a new penalty. One that I'm glad later got to keep its name in the 4Kids dub, the Mind Crush. As is explained later on in the anime, Yugi destroys the part of Kaiba's heart that was filled with evil. But now we skip back to the manga. With Joey and Taya still held at gunpoint, they're saved by a jacketless Tristan. Though one of the guards manages to get Joey at gunpoint again, he's ordered by Mokuba to let him go, and Tristan reveals that Mokuba was the one who saved him from the block room. As Yugi approaches his friends, Taya asks why Kaiba did all this, and Mokuba tells the backstory, for which we actually need to skip ahead to Season 3 and the Virtual World filler arc, because there is actually some canon shit in there. As is explained between flashbacks and the Virtual World arc, Seto and Mokuba had spent much of their younger days in an orphanage. During their time there, the orphanage was visited by the founder of Kaiba Corp, Gozaburo Kaiba. Seeing their meal ticket, Seto challenged Gozaburo to a game of chess with the condition that if Seto won, Gozaburo would adopt him and Mokuba. What they don't mention though is that Seto won by cheating. Gozaburo proceeded to put Seto through hell, raising him in his own image, until one day, Seto managed to gain control of Kaiba Corp. Now, I didn't need to watch the 4Kids dub to know this next bit never would have made it in, but I decided to check the original Japanese version, and although they do mention that Gozaburo died shortly afterward, that's not how it went in the manga. But what happens in the manga is easily the biggest part of Kaiba's motivation. You see, in the manga, Seto gains control of Kaiba Corp, and Gozaburo's immediate response is to jump head first out of the window behind him. His final words: "I lost my game with you. Burn this into your brain, Seto. This is what a loser deserves." Kaiba is so obsessed with beating Yugi because his adoptive father taught him that to lose means to die. In both versions, a part of Mokuba wishes Seto had never won his chess game, because maybe then he would still know how to smile. In the manga, though, Yugi shows Mokuba that Kaiba is picking up the pieces of his heart with a visual that I just absolutely love. Mokuba asks if his brother will come back, and Yugi tells him that someday, when he completes the puzzle, he will return. After this, Joey gets a call from Hanasaki, who says that Grandpa's surgery was successful and that he's the healthiest collectible card game player they've ever seen. Yeah, gotta be honest, probably not a lot of competition. They decide to go straight over to see him, and Joey realizes that he has no idea when Yugi changed back to his original self. Yugi notes that today, for the first time, he can remember all the battles they fought together. And there it is. The differences between the first episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime and the corresponding chapters of the manga, with some backstories added in. I know I had to skip over some stuff with Bakura and Shadi, but they fit better with the anime later in the story, and that's really how I want to be doing this series. I'll be back covering the Duelist Kingdom arc at some point, but do not expect it to be quick. This takes a lot of time to work on. Hell, I started writing this script when I hadn't even finished recording all the audio for the Grass Type Only video. And for the most part, this was just covering one episode. I probably won't cover the future episodes in such detail, going into detail with the duels and everything. This was just one that kind of needed all those extra chapters to build on top of each other. Okay, I don't know how to do a proper outro, so bye.